So hi everyone, thank you for that lovely introduction, Jim. My name is Savanna Jackson, and unlike the other two speakers tonight, I am not a seasoned professional quite yet. I'm actually still a student, and I'm a graduate student at the University of Toronto in the Biomedical Communications program. If you don't know exactly what biomedical communications means, please don't worry, because you're definitely not the first to give me a confused look upon hearing that term. But despite its very kind of sciencey sounding term, it is in fact actually a creative degree. And it's designed for students essentially who want to have careers in the visual communication of science, medicine, and health. Again, usually I have to kind of explain this concept to people. I get to this point in the conversation, they're like, well, what does that even mean? What does that mean? Visual communication of medicine, science, and health, those things don't usually go together. To help answer, let me ask you this. How many of you guys have ever studied from a science textbook in your life? Yeah, a lot of you. So you've probably seen images sort of like this. One thing that I know is that I studied lots of these, and once I started studying, I realized, I never really asked myself, where do these images come from? I kind of assumed, like most people, that just a traditional illustrator did these types of drawings, just like any other drawing in any other book. I've now realized that a lot of the people or a lot of these types of drawings come from professionals working in the biomedical communications industry. And these images are, of course, beautiful, as you can see, but they need something that regular illustrations don't necessarily need, and that's accuracy. Mm-hmm. And accuracy is kind of what sets our industry apart from the traditional illustration world, and it's kind of the whole foundation of our program, because especially when people are using these types of images in a learning context, it needs to be very precise. Things can't be out of place, especially if people like medical school students, doctors, if they're learning these things, they need to know that this tendon is right here. Accuracy is sort of the foundation of where we come in as biomedical illustrators. While traditional illustrators kind of draw on imagination and what they might see in the world around them, biomedical illustrators use a strong background in science knowledge to kind of draw on and interpret resources like scientific data, MRIs, CAT scans, basically raw scientific data to try and make what is on the inside of the body visible to those who will never be able to see it. I showed you some of these drawings, and a lot of these were anatomical illustrations. And typically when I talk about biomedical communications, that's what people assume right off the bat, is that it's anatomical drawings. And even though it is true that historically that is kind of where our industry started, in the present day, biomedical communications actually addresses much more than what we call just gross anatomy. So yeah, this kind of thing. So gross anatomy is sort of organs and body parts and tissues that you can see with the naked eye, but biomedical communications today addresses a lot more than that. Basically, the processes that occur inside of our body are very complex, and they often occur at scales that are much too small or much too quickly for us to see with the naked eye. So that's kind of where we come in, is we draw on raw scientific data to help try and visualize kind of the things on a cellular level, so that people can learn from them accordingly. These things are very abstract. Raw scientific data, if you were looked at this, you would think, oh, I don't know what this is. Even me looking at this, before I started the program, I would take this and say, I have no idea how to interpret this. But if you go to the next slide, this is a piece of DNA, and this is basically what we do. We take something like what you just saw, the research, and create something that you can actually follow and that someone can learn from very easily. Though illustration is a huge part of biomedical communications, it's also not the only part of communications either. So particularly over the last few decades, as technology has kind of advanced, the kind of work that's being done by biomedical communicators has expanded and evolved to include 2D animation, 3D animation, 3D modeling. So you can see here we have bone and the kind of texture that you see inside of a bone. We also do the design of interactive technologies such as medical and educational websites and applications, and even scientific games, kind of serious games if you've ever heard of those. That's something that we work on as well. So you name it, kind of any space in which visual information can actually help the understanding of scientific information is kind of a space where someone in biomedical communications could work and where they have an applicable role. So that means that anyone kind of from a traditional artist to a very tech-savvy sort of programmer can find a place in this industry. So basically, to make a very long story short, at its core, the field of biomedical communications kind of encompasses three major roles. We have an artist and designer role, we have sort of a researcher scientist role, and then we have sort of an educator translator role as well. So first of all, the art and design kind of aspect. So first of all, as you guys know, if you're doing art and design at George Brown here or elsewhere, you know that humans are drawn to and learn more easily from visuals than they do from text and audio information. And we're also drawn to things that are aesthetically pleasing, or when they're arranged according to certain principles of design, we can learn from them much more easily. So striking visuals not only draw us in and make us more curious, but they also can be specifically designed for learning, either by placement of elements on the page or the timing of an animation. And plus, since we're dealing with some pretty complicated subject matter, a high level of imagination and creativity is often required to actually kind of come up with ways to translate that complex information into something that everyone can understand. So then there's the kind of scientist researcher role. So, you know, having a strong foundation in scientific knowledge is huge because you have to sort of draw on that knowledge all the time as a biomedical communicator to be able to kind of understand that raw data that you're going to translate into that sort of more digestible and accessible visual information. However, if I'm really being honest, very few of us do our projects straight from memory of scientific information. We have to do research for every single project that we do, but that's just the point, is that because we have that kind of strong background in science, we know how to do research. And we also have learned, through our scientific training, we also have learned to find relevant resources that will help inform our work. We know how to consider variables that maybe not everyone can see. We know how to ask the right questions to sort of parse out those variables, and we can draw conclusions based on evidence. All of those are part of the research project, but they're all also very applicable to the design process as well. And we kind of, you know, we know how to eliminate emotions and our own preconceptions when it's necessary, but we also know when it's appropriate to continue exploring and kind of apply our creativity. So a lot of, you know, there's the scientific background in terms of having the knowledge, but there's also sort of that element of applying the scientific process to art and design. And then the last kind of role is this sort of educator translator role. So a huge part of biomedical communication involves understanding one's audience. And with our work, we may be trying to teach scientific information to a 10-year-old science student or to a doctor with 30 years of experience. So since raw scientific research is rarely communicated in a language that everybody can understand, we have to get into the heads of the people that we're trying to teach and make decisions about what level of complexity is appropriate to suit their educational needs and limitations. So we kind of have to translate scientific information into a language that, like I said, is accessible and digestible to those who need to learn from it. So yeah, so it's kind of, biomedical communications is sort of at this intersection between artistry, science, and education, which is what I really love about it. And the goal of biomedical communications as a whole is achieving clarity in communicating scientific material. And it was this kind of diversity of roles within this industry that sort of led me to the field in the first place, and that continues to drive my passion for it to this day. Basically, you know, growing up, I had tons of different interests. My first love was drawing, and specifically drawing accurately. I mean, I would look around the room at any given time and always want to perfectly recreate something that I saw in my environment, always asking people, what should I draw? What should I draw? Tell me something to draw. And I was never great at kind of conceptualizing abstract art. It was never really my thing. But as is the case with many young aspiring artists, as I'm sure many of you in the room know, society told me that art is not a very lucrative career. And I was encouraged to focus on my other strength, which was the sciences. And so I pursued biology in university with the intention of becoming a doctor initially. Because, you know, I liked the idea of helping people, of continuing to sort of learn throughout my career. And I kind of liked the idea of being able to educate patients on a daily basis about their own health. I liked that sort of education aspect of it as well. And so I worked hard to fulfill all the requirements that one needs to when they're kind of a med school hopeful. I tried to get top grades, I was volunteering, gained research experience, participated in extracurricular activities to sort of set myself apart. But as I progressed through my degree, I succumbed to the pressures of preparing for med school. I found very little time to be creative, and I often felt as though my academic experience was kind of becoming something of a, basically filling out someone else's checklist. I wasn't really enjoying it as much as I should have been, and I realized that, if I don't have time to be creative in an undergraduate biology degree, how am I going to have time to be creative going through medical school and as a doctor? I just kind of knew that if I really wanted to integrate creativity into my life and my career, it probably wasn't going to be through becoming a physician. So at the risk of sounding dramatic, that thought kind of drained the life out of me. I really felt that was something important that I needed on a daily basis, just to give myself happiness. So when I completed my degree, I had kind of a decision to make. I was like, do I continue on this medical path that I've invested so much time and effort into, or do I pursue my passion for art and design in some way, shape, or form? And I ended up taking some time off to think about it. I didn't really want to commit to the 4 years of medical school before I really knew the answer to that question. So I did apply to medical school, and I applied to a couple master's programs, none of which I was very passionate about or was very excited about. And then I also kind of secretly applied to art and design foundation programs around Toronto, thinking, it's just for fun. If nothing else works out, I'll just do that. And if I don't get into medical school, I'll have an excuse to sort of try the art thing. And I interviewed for medical school, but realized very quickly that my heart was not in it. I loved medicine, but kind of the passion and drive that I once felt to becoming a doctor had been replaced by doubts about whether I wanted to sacrifice that love for creativity and design for those 60 to 80-hour work weeks. And when I didn't get into medical school, I was not really surprised, first of all, because as I said, I really did not feel passionate about it at that time. But even more so, I felt a distinct feeling of relief. And that was kind of a sign for me. I was like, I think that this is probably not the path for me if I'm getting this news and having a sigh of relief. So the next year, I sort of took the plunge, and I decided to attend George Brown for Art and Design Foundation. And it did feel strange, a little strange at first, being in a completely new academic sort of space. I wasn't really used to being allowed to think creatively. A lot of the science was just memorization, doing research and basically regurgitating it for someone else. And so it did feel a little bit odd, but, the other thing too was I was kind of worried about what my parents and friends might think, going from sort of a stable and prestigious sort of career path to going to a first-year college program in a field that was completely different. It felt like, I was worried that people would think, she's just giving up on something that she spent so much time and effort working towards. But my worries very quickly melted away as I began work in the program. Within weeks, I was sure I'd made the right decision, and I could not believe I'd neglected creativity for so long. And being here, my mind felt at home. Like it felt like it was the way that my mind should be used. And it became clear to me very quickly that creativity needed to be integrated into my career. It was something that I really wanted to do every day. And it was then that I remembered that I had heard about this program, Biomedical Communications at U of T. And after further research, I realized that this profession sort of checked all of my boxes, and I knew I had to apply. So I worked on my portfolio here at George Brown tirelessly, and actually have a couple of, so these are some of the pieces that I did for my portfolio, and you'll notice that very few of them have medical base, but they just wanted to kind of see that you sort of had the art skills to do it. This is the only one that really has any sort of scientific element to it. But, I worked on this portfolio. I worked so hard on it and loved every minute of making the portfolio. I wrote a passionate letter of intent. And when it was finally completed, I had rarely been more proud of anything that I'd created in my entire life. It was the first application that I'd submitted after university for something that I really wanted, and it felt very authentically me. And needless to say, when I was accepted, I was thrilled, and I couldn't wait to get started. So before the school year began, I was kind of under the impression that the program was first and foremost a traditional illustration program, which was fine with me at the time. I mean, I was excited by the idea of happily living out the rest of my days illustrating anatomical diagrams. At that point, it really excited me. However, I quickly learned that the program offered a great variety of experiences and catered to many different interests. And so just to name a few, some of the things that we did in our first year, so we did a human cadaver dissection and did an anatomy course. This was one of the pieces that we did for our anatomy course, which is part of the spine. We did illustration for textbooks, so we got to do basically a pathology illustration showing kind of a disease process. We got to do a natural science illustration and got to go to the ROM and sort of look at all the specimens there and decide what we wanted to draw. We did immunological illustration, which deals with molecular level processes and shows how they kind of work in our bodies. We did 3D modeling. We did digital painting, so this is part of the brain called the cerebellum. And we did some some design principles. So we sort of learned a little bit of graphic design as well, and learned how we could integrate that with scientific information. And we did surgical illustration. So this one's not mine, but this is kind of one of the many areas that biomedical communications professionals can go into is demonstrating how a surgeon might go about doing a surgery. And then we've done data visualization as well. So basically, strangely enough, despite my initial love for the traditional illustration, design was where I thrived. So whereas traditional illustration involves a lot of long days, sort of, sitting alone at a desk pumping out illustrations, which is great for some people. Love doing that. But design offered me the opportunity to do extensive problem solving and to collaborate with others every day and to experiment. All of which kind of excite me. And so when it came to choosing my master's research project, which is kind of like our version of a thesis, I chose a design-based project. And my project, I'm not going to bore you with the details because it's not very exciting to the outside world, I assume, but it is called Canvas, which it's called, the long form is Citation, Annotation, and Visualization Integration System. And basically what it is the project involves designing a graphic user interface for a web application that will allow medical illustrators to tag images, sort of similarly to how you would tag images on Facebook or Instagram, but you're tagging them with citation information. So because medical illustrations are kind of full of actual scientific data, it's very important to be able to find that data when you're looking at an illustration, to be able to kind of do further research on your own. So this is for people who are like researchers or students that are going to be able to, they're basically going to be able to look at a picture and find the information behind that picture using the system. So, and this project has given me the opportunity to kind of go through the design process from front to back. So I've been able to run focus groups. I formulated design principles to kind of guide the progress of the project. I've done wireframing, prototyping, and usability testing, and it's been a really interesting experience for sure. And so, as I think is probably obvious from the fact that I just told you, I really love design. I would like to become a designer eventually. And the only thing though about the program that I'm taking is that Biomedical Communications offers a vast range of roles for people with a highly variable skill set, even within the field of design. So I had a little bit of a tough time. I'm still having a bit of a tough time deciding exactly which area of design I like to go. As I said, we kind of do UI UX design. We do data visualization, graphic design. So because I've enjoyed almost all of these, I've kind of found it a bit tricky to decide. But an area of design that has kind of captured my attention is service design. And for anybody who's not familiar with service design, it's basically a field that it's related, if you go to the next one, it's related to user experience design. It's also related to customer design, but it's not quite either of the two. So while UX design focuses on enhancing user satisfaction by improving usability, accessibility, and overall experience of a product, and customer experience is enhancing customers' contact with a brand, service design is a somewhat more holistic approach. So it's kind of looking at a design problem from all angles, and it involves planning and organizing resources such as people, infrastructure, and communication, and material components of a service to enhance the interactions between basically the person who provides the service and the user. And I'll give some examples so that you guys kind of get a sense of what that means, because it is kind of a sort of abstract definition. But one question you might ask as well is that why is my experience in biomedical communications relevant to this field? So healthcare is a service like any other service. Its users are patients, and its service providers are healthcare professionals and administrators. Ideally, I would like to enter the service design industry, but specifically in the healthcare field to kind of help improve patient experience and education in meaningful ways. Because healthcare, like any other service, requires that sort of design element, at the forefront to be able to keep things running smoothly and efficiently. So I'm particularly interested in the work of Toronto firms such as Bridgeable. So I'll give you guys an example of the type of things that they do just to kind of give you an idea. So Bridgeable is a multidisciplinary team that deals with design problems ranging from healthcare to financial services and things in the public sector. They've designed projects such as Mars Baby Bundles. So this was a mobile application that new mothers can use to track personal and clinical information about their baby's health. So this is the kind of project that they would work on. Another one that they did is called the Artery of Education. So this was basically this was an immersive digital exhibit that was basically designed to teach users about their cardiovascular and heart health. And it was basically a kind of a walk-through artery that you could learn different things. They had a huge touch wall that had sort of different facts about cardiovascular health. You could see what your arteries look like from the inside with different sort of conditions. And basically, as new technologies are continuing to emerge, these kind of explorative design approaches become much more plausible and much more useful. And so my kind of current fantasy is to sort of be part of that movement. So I'm hoping to kind of enter that space after graduation. Fingers crossed. All right. So what should you take away from this presentation? So regarding biomedical communications as a profession, the first thing to note is that it's changing a lot right now. As I said, it kind of was traditional illustration, but with all these new technologies, it's kind of changing very much over the last 5 or 10 years. So only time will kind of tell how it will continue to evolve, but it's very, very exciting. It's very niche, which can be good and bad. So bad because, well, like not many people know it exists. So a lot of effort has to be taken to sell myself, basically. But it is good because there are very few people with the same kind of diverse skill set or the same selection of skills. So in my experience, selling oneself with the right crowd is not too hard. And who should go into this field? So people who are creative, but also have very strong attention to detail and value accuracy. If you like to collect information and do research. And also if you enjoy problem solving and simplifying complex ideas. And regarding the lessons I've learned, so the first one is don't be afraid to take the circuitous route. The stages in which you feel the most unsure about your future are often the stages I find that you learn the most about what you want. So be explorative. Nothing is really a step back. Each new experience is just a data point to kind of help you choose the right path. Keep exploring. I think the days of standard jobs are pretty much over. New intersections between fields are happening all the time. So if your interests lie in seemingly different worlds, doesn't always mean you have to choose. Keep looking for something that's going to fit what you want to do. And the last thing is do what you're good at, but make sure you love it. Understand your strengths and limitations. Take advantage of your strengths and play to them, but direct them towards something that you truly enjoy doing. And I promise it will not feel as much like work. And thanks everyone for listening. If anyone has any questions, you can do that.
Thank you very much, Savanna.